We've addressed the people who say that race of the ancient Egyptians was white. We've addressed the people who say that the race of the ancient Egyptians are Middle Eastern. But what about the people who say that ancient Egyptians didn't have a race at all and were completely unique to everybody? Well, this new video from 2024 is going to do just that. Let's look at it.
The race of the ancient Egyptians has been a topic of controversy from at least the 18th century among people interested in Egypt and history as a whole.
Already I have a problem. Homer, Herodotus, and all the other Greeks that were there early had the same opinions that the ancient Egyptians were black and they matched the Colchians and the Ethiopians. This is a fact. But later, you have 97% of the Romans saying that the ancient Egyptians are black, with a 3% of people claiming that they were Middle Eastern. This means the controversy spans way back. And then later you have Europeans who come in, and most of them, even in the 18th century to the 20th century, claim that the ancient Egyptians are black, with the few exception claiming that they're Middle Eastern and the others claiming that they have no idea what the race is. It's only now that everyone is saying that the ancient Egyptians are 100% not black.
Early on in the controversy, the view of race in ancient Egypt was Eurocentric in nature, but lately Afrocentric views on the topic are just as prevalent. In this video, we will analyze what race even means and how it applies to the ancient Egyptians and their civilization.
It's true that there were a lot of scholars who were Eurocentric in nature and made claims that the ancient Egyptians were white people. What's not true is that all historians or most historians thought this was a fact. If you look at dictionaries where they tried to translate the ancient Egyptian language, a lot of the attempts were taking African languages like Zulu and trying to insert words to try and see if you could finally find the word. Like, for example, the word ona, which means to see, was tried by a historian in the 18th century to try and find out what the ancient Egyptian words were. But only later did they realize that using Bantu wasn't the most fruitful way of finding out the ancient Egyptian. And then they used Coptic, which, by the way, Coptic was used by the Arabs a couple hundred years prior to decipher the ancient Egyptian language. I think they deciphered 80% of the words before the Europeans ever did. Arab scholars, I'm going to show you later. That's why it's funny when people say the Rosetta Stone deciphered everything. It's not the full story.
Stick to the end of the video to see my conclusion on the issue. Let's begin. What is race? To figure out how race
Okay, already I have another problem. We all know what the hell race is. We're talking about the fact that people look different from one another in group settings and have common features and whatever. We don't have to go into what race is.
applies to the ancient Egyptians, we have to figure out where race even comes from. The origin of the races Negroid, Caucasoid, and Mongoloid started in the 1780s, and it was meant to group vast swaths of people based on their appearance.
Okay, well, I guess we don't know what race is and what racism is. It's not Negroid, Caucasoid, and Mongoloid. Those weren't the only three races that they put up a long time ago. They put up a whole bunch of races. And secondly, it wasn't really only about the physical appearance. In the 1780s till, well, something like the 70s, when they were doing scientific racism, it wasn't just about the physical appearance, it was also about intelligence. They used to measure people's skulls and claim that the people were intelligent or stupid. Their justification wasn't people look different, therefore we would kill them. Their justification was people are different in intelligence, and that the people who are dumber need to go because they are polluting the human race. And that's why they had all these genocidal tactics. And of course, some of them, like Jewish people or whatever. They were attacked for being, you know, an intelligence thing or whatever. But this is not. I don't know why you think that race has always been the same. These people from the 1780s don't look at race the way we look at it today. The Mongoloid, which is a bad word, the Mongol, the Negro, and the Caucasian setup is only a modern one. And even it is flawed, like I showed you, because the Mongol face is common in every race. So you can't split people up by skulls. You can't go, this guy's got this type of skull, this guy's got this type, because there's people, you can pick up a skull in China and recreate a black person. You can pick up a skull in Africa and recreate a Chinese person. You can pick up a skull in the Americas and reconstruct a Chinese person. It just depends what type of skull you pick up. If you pick up the one that is Mongol in character, then you will get the same result. Everything else will be conjecture based on geography.
What is extremely important to note is that this was done in a way to rank these races of people in order of superiority and to justify slavery and colonization of perceived lower races. This was also done at a time where they cannot analyze and compare human DNA. Once we were able to analyze DNA, they discovered there were only very minuscule differences genetic wise between human populations around the world. While there are differences, it would no way be enough to completely separate and rank people. This also came before a time when the scientific community agreed that all humans originally came from the same population group out of East or Southern Africa.
I don't know what all scientists agree on is, but I will say that it's not before that time because Darwin had already made his theory that Africans were the first place where humans came from. He already made that conjecture, and this was added to the theory saying that human beings in Africa were at the bottom of the evolutionary chain and white people were the most evolved. It wasn't, oh, they had no idea.
However, as humans spread and advanced culturally, hundreds of different ethnicities developed, and if we group them by color, that would be the only thing they have in common except the continent their land falls on. A Sami person in northern Scandinavia is different in almost every way to a Spartan from Greece, except for the fact that their skin color is similar and they're both from Europe.
This is simply not true. The people in Greece, really phenotypically, if you talk about the way they look, they sort of cluster with Middle Eastern people. They've got light skin, black hair, dark eyes, a similar skull shape. They've got a very Caucasian skull shape. They're somewhat tall. Uh, they've got there's like a whole bunch of features that you can pick from all of these people that will make them look the same. And the Sami people, sure, they look somewhat different than the uh Greco people, Greco Roman people, or the Spartans, as you want to call it. But that's because the Sami people are uniquely different from a lot of the people in Europe. But compare a Greek person to a British person, and they start to look a lot more similar.
The Yoruba people of Western Africa and the Tamil people of Southern India have similar skin colors, but you wouldn't consider them the same.
What the hell is that comparison?
Grouping people based on their skin color might be the most inefficient and inaccurate way to do so. People in the ancient world would also have no concept of this or even ranking people by skin color or facial features. Ancient peoples in Rome, Greece, China, and Egypt would have separated themselves based on familial or tribal ties rather than skin color and physical appearance. What is important to note is that this is not to say ancient people thought everyone was equal. It was quite the opposite, and ancient people thought that their specific tribe or family was superior to others. They just would not have grouped it based on skin color or hair texture. So before we continue,
Actually, all the groups you just mentioned did group people by skin color. The ancient Greek people called black people Ethiopians, and they said they were separate from Arabs, which are the Middle Easterners, and they said those were different than Europeans, which is the people in Europe. Um, the Chinese also grouped Indians different than themselves. I mean, everybody did it. Even Ethiopians grouped other groups of people different than themselves, or black people grouped themselves different than the other people. They didn't racially profile or anything like that, but they did sit there and say, those people look like this, those people look like that, those people look like this. This idea that they didn't do that is made up in order to try and dismiss the idea that people could tell what people look like from the past, and it's stupid. There's a big difference between recognizing the physical appearance of people and racism.
With Egyptian civilization, we should think to ourselves, should we even be attempting to categorize the Egyptians with the modern but still obsolete and debunked grouping of humans that was oppressive in nature? Well, today we will. Egyptian civilization. The oldest human remains found in Egypt are approximately 33,000 years old, and it is believed that humans were in Egypt for much longer, originally coming from East Africa. These people would have looked like East African populations that migrated from there, as they were the first humans to settle in the region. However, the civilization we call Egypt today began around 3150 BC when King Narmer started the first dynasty and united Upper and Lower Egypt, and it ended in 30 BC when it was conquered by Augustus and the Romans, meaning that there is at least 30,000 years of history from the arrival of humans to Egypt to dynastic Egypt, and over 30
The official understanding is that Nectanebo was the last king or native king of ancient Egypt.
years of history that spans Egyptian civilization. A lot can happen in that time span, but we will focus on dynastic Egypt because we have more records of conquest and migration during that time. It's important to remember that since Egypt was a powerful empire and a major hub for trade, many people migrated and passed through the area, meaning that at any given time, several different ethnicities and nationalities would have been living and moving in and out of Egypt.
Several ethnicities moved in and out of the Middle East and kingdoms, Mesopotamia, Iraq, Greece, all of these other places as well. But I don't see us doing this big hoorah trying to split hairs about what racism is or race is.
As anyone could expect, people would intermingle, leading to babies being born of mixed ancestry, as well as people settling down and becoming Egyptian culturally, but not ethnically or genetically. Given the size of
Well, what about the Egyptian genes that are found in Turkey, Syria, in the Middle East in general? There's a whole bunch of ancient genes that are found in these places, even Greece. So, does that mean that those places as well are whatever you're saying they are?
Egypt as well, the people in Lower Egypt and closer to the Mediterranean would have looked slightly different than people of Upper Egypt and deeper in the Sahara. During
The people of Lower Egypt would have looked different than people of Upper Egypt. I've heard this a billion times. Now I would love somebody to substantiate it. Why would the people of Lower Egypt look different than the people of Upper Egypt? Also, I want to know if Nubians can go into Upper Egypt, why would they just stop there? Why do we find mummies in Roman times in the Fayum mummies? Why do we find some traces of African DNA in the 6% range if they're stuck in the bottom in Upper Egypt?
the span of dynastic Egypt, several foreign groups invaded Egypt, and therefore you can assume that they also mixed in with the local population. These invaders include the Nubians from the south, the Assyrians and the Persians from the east, and the Macedonians from the north. This meant pharaohs and nobles from the period of foreign invasion would have been foreign, having Nubian, Middle Eastern, or European DNA, but the mass majority of the common people would have still been ethnically Egyptian. Unfortunately, most of the common people were not intricately mummified, as that was expensive, and were instead placed in common graves in the desert. This means that we don't have many preserved bodies of the common people in earlier portions of Egyptian civilization.
Well, I guess if he admits that when people take over, there's a shift in the genetics of the people, but I hope he keeps that energy when it comes to the Arabs who eventually took over and the Ottomans and all these other people. Make sure you keep that same energy.
But what we do have is color pictures. So, what would the Egyptians look like? Well, thankfully, the Egyptians left us with a plethora of paintings and depictions of themselves in their temples and tombs. Next, I'm going to show several pictures of Egyptians. We can discuss what you see. Hey guys, so just wanted to make some quick commentary while we looked at the pictures. I just wanted to first say that it's absolutely incredible how detailed these images are, and I also wanted to say that I was able to go to Egypt a couple years ago and see a lot of these pictures in person, and I recommend everyone go if they can, at least one time in their life, because it's truly life changing to see these in real life and see them with your own eyes, because we've been looking at them since we were kids. And thirdly, is I think no matter what race you think the Egyptians were, I think we can all agree that at least the Egyptian women are absolutely beautifully depicted. So let's get back to the video, but I just wanted to make that quick commentary. Thanks. So looking at these pictures, I think we can all agree that there was a variety of different skin tones in ancient Egypt, ranging from tan skin to dark brown, meaning that there was a spectrum of what people looked like in ancient Egypt as they were a diverse society. Next,
Looking at these pictures, I can tell that you're running away from the statues of the ancient Egyptians, which are more detailed than just some cartoon picture looking to the left. Also, the skin color, nobody agrees with you that the skin color of the ancient Egyptians varied this widely. Instead, they think that some of the skin color interpretations are symbolic. Some say that the brown is symbolic of fertility, and some say the yellow is symbolic of fertility, and some say the brown is symbolic of strength, showing that men had a tan outside and all of this other stuff. But no one agrees that there's like this variety of colors. Like, oh, there's white people and then there's black. No, nobody really agrees with that. Furthermore, pretending that the Eurocentrists, which I usually don't defend, or the Afrocentrists are claiming that it's just the skin color that decides what race someone is, that's stupid. That's building a straw man, which makes your argument way easier to tear down. Most people are talking about the physical appearance beyond just skin
next, I'm
color.
going to show you how the Egyptians depicted their neighbors, as it should be quite clear from the jump that regardless of color, you could tell the difference between the Egyptians, the Nubians, and other Western Asiatic people called Amu by their features and their garments. The Egyptians made sure to depict themselves as distinct people from their neighbors, as they were a xenophobic people and did not always embrace foreigners. Hey guys, it's me again. So I just wanted to make two observations while we go through these images. So the first one is these are the Western Asiatic people or the Amu, and the two things that you'll notice is that their garments are different than what the Egyptians wore, and a lot of the men have beards. So the Egyptians never depicted themselves with beards and not usually depicted themselves with beards. So these are two main differences between them and the Western Asiatic Amu. And the next group we're going to look at are the Nubians. And you can tell the difference between the Nubians and the Egyptians by three ways, really. The Nubians tend to have darker skin in their depictions, their garments are also much different than the Egyptians, and their head shape is slightly different as well. So the Egyptians didn't really see themselves as Western Asiatic Amu or Nubian, they were distinct. Conclusion. So to conclude, what race were the ancient Egyptians? At the end of the day, you can't apply outdated racial terms to the ancient Egyptians. The Egyptians had no specific color. Ultimately, the ancient Egyptians were simply Egyptian. If you want to know what that means or what they would have looked like, look at the diverse artifacts.
You got some nerves talking about diverse artifacts when in real life you showed like five paintings of cartoon characters looking to the left when there's so much variety in ancient Egypt. If you want to know how little diversity ancient Egypt had, go look at the statues yourself. You will see that they have a uniform look to them. Very rarely do they go away from this appearance, meaning that they themselves did not see themselves as diverse. Most people are painted brown, including the woman. Only sometimes are they painted yellow, and sometimes those women who are painted yellow and brown. So in one picture they'll be yellow, in one they'll be brown. The yellow is symbolic, and I've said this over and over again. This is the worst, the single worst argument. And it comes from this thing of like, hey, we're all the same, guys. It's like, we're not talking about that. We understand that human beings are the same and we're all capable of, building rockets and going to space and hugging our grandmothers or whatever.
And depictions they left behind. Thank you.
Okay, let's subscribe, everybody. Let's try to get to 1,000.